Having a proper introduction and conclusion can really get your speech started off well and end it solidly. So let's look at what would be included in that introduction. First, you want to consider what kind of attention getter, or also known as a hook, would be helpful in this circumstance. In some cases, a good story would work really well here. In other cases, a strong statistic or quote. Sometimes a visual or a video of some sort helps really well for that beginning point. Depends on your topic, and that is something that you would need to thoroughly consider before kind of getting into it. But it's a very big deal to include a strong, purposeful, and useful attention getter right at the get-go. One that I've seen work really well is for students that or employees that choose to kind of start a story at the beginning of the speech, and then they leave it at a cliffhanger as they go into the body, and in the conclusion they wrap up that story. So that kind of helps to really grab attention and keep it. But there are a lot of options, like I mentioned. Now, once you have that attention getter, the next thing you need to keep in mind is relating the topic to your audience. Understanding that you've done a full audience analysis as best you can, and you know how to handle getting that information in front of their face and helping them to see how it's valuable to them. So ask yourself, why should an audience care about this topic? Why should they care at all about this information? And what benefit or need do they have for using this topic information? So make sure you share with them, after you've done an analysis of your audience, how it might benefit them. If you're speaking in a college classroom, you want to gear that relationship of the topic to your audience to a group of college students. If you are giving a speech to a group of teachers, you want to gear the information to the teachers, and so on. The next thing you want to consider is your credibility statement. And this is not the credibility of your sources. While that's important, that's not what I'm talking about in the introduction. In the introduction, this is your credibility. What gives you the right to speak on this topic? What kind of credentials do you have? Now, are you in the field? Do you have a degree in the subject? Did you research the topic for an extended period of time? All of those things would work for establishing your credibility. And then finally, you need a thesis statement, a good, strong, central idea that says, hey, this is what the topic is going to address. And oftentimes that thesis statement comes with a preview of those main points. Sometimes it's intertwined into the thesis, and sometimes it is its own thing. But you kind of want to say, look, here are the major pieces of my speech. This is what I want to share with you. This, this, and this. So depending upon your topic, you may organize it differently, but in a sense, you are giving the crux of your speech in a sentence or two, and you're also making sure that they understand sort of where you're going to go from here. Now, as far as the conclusion goes, there are a few additional things to keep in mind. One, you want to make sure your audience knows your ending. So you can do the traditional simple conclusion statement, like in conclusion, in summary, finally, to wrap up, that sort of thing. Or you can do it with your voice, where you kind of show a buildup of tone and energy when you're doing the body of the speech, and then you sort of drop off towards the end and you wrap it all up together. And you could say things like, let's bring this back around, or let's conclude here, and also use your voice. That is also an option. Another thing you want to include is a very vivid ending. This is very similar to your attention getter or your hook. You are using a story or statistic or some kind of quote to sort of bring it all together at the end and leave it stuck in our minds. So you want to keep that as a similar strategy that you would use as an attention getter. Earlier I mentioned I've had students that in the past have done the beginning of a story in the intro, and then in the conclusion they will wrap it up. That would be part of what I would call a vivid ending. And then finally, what you need to have in that conclusion, and these things can be interchanged in terms of the order, they're not in this specific order, but the final thing you need to have is a reinforcement of that thesis statement, a recap of what it was you just said, not a literal recap, but kind of a summarized or paraphrased version of what you just said. You get all of that together and you should have a decently strong conclusion. Introductions and conclusions are the beginning and ends of your speech. And primacy recency theory states that we remember that which comes first and that which comes last. So these are quite important.